Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. Today is October 2nd, which on this day in 1965, the wonderful drink Gatorade was created at the University of Florida. So it's a sports drink that my kids love every day when they go out and play. So hopefully you guys also partake in the Gatorade flavoring. So in today's briefing, we'll be covering the most recent trends that our threat intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. My name is Keith Wojcicki, Global Head of Threat Intelligence. This week, we're joined by Senior Vice President George Glass, Vice Presidents Dave Truman, Vice President Mikesh Nagar, and Vice President Sarah Becker from our Cyber Threat Intel team. So last week, Google recategorized the CVE 2023-4863. It's affecting Chromium as CVE 2023-5129. You'll write down all those numbers, but directly addressing the vulnerability WebP component. So Kroll noted that the CVE 2023-4863 affected WebP in our September 18th bulletin. Due to the persuasive nature of the WebP in many electronic applications and the use of the library in many products, Kroll assesses that there'll be a significant tail to the remediation of this vulnerability for some time to come. Now, it is worth noting that this exploit could be difficult depending on the architecture, but the large attack surface and the fact that the vulnerability is a zero-click exploit makes this extremely sought after. So Kroll does recommend keeping an active patch management program in place for the Electron-based applications and to follow up with the vendors for any remediation timelines. So with that, we're going to get into the briefing today. That's just kind of a highlight keynote for this week. So it's going to be a little bit longer today, but we have a lot going on. The WSFTP vulnerability, Exim zero-day vulnerability, USB malware coming back again, the ZENRAT malware, SharePoint vulnerability, it's proof of concept. Dave's going to discuss that. I'll talk about ATLASCROSS, and we're going to round it up with Sarah with some ransomware roundup. With that, I'm going to turn over to George. George?
Thank you very much, Keith. So we have reports of some exploitation of the WSFTP vulnerability. So last week, Progress released fixes for 8 vulnerabilities. The worst of the bunch is CVE 2023-40044. This has a CVSS score of 10, and we have reports that this is now being exploited in the wild. This vulnerability is a .NET deserialization vulnerability that can allow remote code execution. And indeed, it wasn't long before a POC was released on Twitter, which prompted Asset Note, part of the discovery team for this vulnerability, to write a technical write-up. We've taken a look at that, and it is a trivial vulnerability to exploit. You just need to be able to serialize some commands, and they run directly on the machine that is operating the WSFTP application. We assess that exploitation in the short term is highly likely, with similar TTPs to what we saw Klopp doing with MoveIt, with a mass exploit and then extortion after exfiltration of data. Both Rapid7 and other security researchers have publicly disclosed that they've seen exploitation in the wild. And so it's absolutely pivotal to patch this vulnerability ASAP, or if patching would be delayed, consider removing the service from the internet altogether to avoid impact. And that's it for this one, Keith. Back to you.
Thanks, George. Appreciate that. Now we're going to pass it over to Mikesh, talk about a new vulnerability.
Thank you, Keith. So researchers at the Zero Day Initiative discovered a vulnerability tracked as CVE 2023-42115. This vulnerability allows remote actors to execute arbitrary code on affected installations of Exim without the requirement to authenticate. The vulnerability has been classed as an auth out-of-band write remote code execution vulnerability with a CVSS score of 9.8. According to the Zero Day Initiative blog post, which they've released, they mentioned that the vulnerability has existed for over a year. And the vulnerability is within the lack of proper validation of user-supplied data to the SMTP service, which is typically run on TCP port 25. What this can result in is a write past the end of the buffer, which allows an attacker to execute code in the context of a service account. Now, a quick search on Shodan showed that there were more than 3.5 million Exim servers exposed online, with the majority located over in the US as well as Germany and Russia. There is a patch released by the maintainers, which is available for the distribution maintainers to grab and then part as the patch cycle. But for the time being, ZDI advises users to ensure that their mail servers are as secure as possible if you are using Exim. That's everything from me. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, Mukesh. I appreciate that. Now we're going to pass it over, or actually back to George to talk about some USB malware.
Thank you, Keith. So Kroll has witnessed a pretty marked increase in the installation of USB-Borne malware. Incidentally, we saw a similar sort of wave last year. We're still trying to ascertain whether that is just because of people coming back from holiday. The actual impetus for the rise is really unknown at this time. But we have pretty good detection coverage of USB-Borne malware, especially after the spate that we saw last year. And what we're most commonly observing is Raspberry Robin malware delivered via USB. So just as a reminder, what Raspberry Robin is, it's a USB spreadable worm, and initial infection of Raspberry Robin is from SEO poisoning using sock Ghoulish campaigns. Raspberry Robin as well is a known precursor to ransomware. And so any Raspberry Robin infection should be treated as a high priority incident. And what we're seeing is a lot of user interaction with the LNK files, which Raspberry Robin requires to execute. And so what we're recommending is stricter USB control policies where practicable. This can be done through a number of EDR defensive technologies as well, and additional user awareness training for strange LNK files on their removable media devices. We'll continue to monitor this. We expect it's probably going to continue throughout the sort of the holiday period coming up here, and we'll continue to report any new findings that we have for this. But for now, that's it for this story. Back to you, Keith.
Thanks, George. And to continue with the George and Mukesh show, I'm going to throw it back to Mukesh to talk about ZENRAT.
Thank you, Keith. So, a recent technical report reported by Proofpoint highlighted the significance of ZENRAT as a cybersecurity threat. It's been observed to be spread through counterfeit Bitwarden packages, affecting primarily Windows users. ZENRAT spreads using deceptive websites that imitates Bitwarden domains. The exact method of redirection to these malicious domains is currently unclear. However, similar malware that have done this have used phishing attacks, malvertising, as well as SEO poisoning tactics. The malware is hidden in a payload named Bitwarden installer version 2023-7-1.exe, which is found on the domain of crazygameis.com. What's interesting here is ZENRAT redirects non-Windows users to an old opensource.com article about Bitwarden, while Windows users who try to download Linux or Mac OS versions are sent to the legitimate Bitwarden site. The actors have taken elaborate steps to appear legitimate, as they've tried to pass the malware off as a piriform speccy tool. This tool is commonly used for getting system information about the device, as well as trying to sign the application with a falsely attributed to who it, which is falsely attributed to a reputable developer. Once the malware infects the system, it gathers information about the host, including CPU and GPU details, as well as the operating system, browser credentials, installed apps, as well as other security software, which is then sent off to the command and control server. What sets this malware slightly apart is that it is built on a modularity nature, which means that the room for development for this malware and expandability is currently endless and up to the attackers and malware operators' imagination. We have ingested all the known IOCs for this malware into our malware intelligence sharing platform and have pushed those out to the detection technology as well. As always, it's always good to stay vigilant, make sure your security measures are updated, and being cautious when downloading software are crucial mitigation steps you can take for these types of threats. Back to you, Keith.
Thanks, Vikesh. Yeah, this is that's good advice here. Yeah, that's a bad one. Make sure you guys are paying attention to that for sure. So with that, we're gonna make a left turn here and talk to Dave about the SharePoint vulnerability. Dave?
Thank you. A proof of concept was released for a vulnerability in SharePoint that Microsoft patched earlier this year. The privilege escalation vulnerability CVE 2023-29357 is the first part of a two-part attack chain that can lead to remote code execution. The vulnerabilities that were first documented for the Vancouver Pawn to Own conference have had patches since May. The POC does not appear to have contributed any new findings to the original disclosure and is only publicly available exploitation code. As the POC only covers the first of the two vulnerabilities, it does not achieve code execution. It can, however, be used to obtain information from SharePoint, potentially at administrator level. The POC code available in a GitHub repository is easy to use. As such, we expect to see internet scanning taking place with malicious actors looking for vulnerable servers. Anyone with an unpatched SharePoint environment is recommended to patch immediately. Thank you. Keith?
Thanks, Dave. I really do appreciate that. And now we're gonna, we can't stop now. We gotta go back to George one more time to talk about ATLASCROSS. George, love to hear your voice.
So NS Focus have released a report about a new APT threat group named ATLASCROSS, and they have been operating for an undetermined period. They appear to be targeting organizations with phishing lures impersonating the American Red Cross, and you can see a example on the right-hand side of your screen there. They use docm lures with macros enabled to install a loader malware called Danger Ads, which in turn installs a new custom programmed multifaceted C++ Trojan, which does pretty much what you would expect a sort of information stealer to do, but it's also capable of loading other malware into mutexes and more. The operational impact of this group is still yet to be determined. Could potentially be espionage. It's still very unclear. We're taking a closer look at this with the detection engineering team at Kroll to understand exactly what this malware does and looks like, and we'll be reporting on any new findings that we have. But for now, that is actually it for me this time. Back to you, Kate.
Thanks so much, George. I really do appreciate that. And we're gonna final round up here with the ransomware roundup from Sarah. Sarah.
Thanks, Keith. So just a quick update, talking about Snatch ransomware. They're exposing visitor traffic on their shaming site. The victim shaming site, it is accessible via the Tor network, is leaking data about its online location as well as visitor data. So this data suggests that Snatch may be Another type of ransomware group that is possibly using paid Google ads, and this is just to con the victims into installing malware that is impersonating different free software programs such as Microsoft Teams, Mozilla Thunderbird, Discord, and Adobe Reader. So researchers identified that Snatch's site exposed its server status page that included information of different IP addresses, and these were IP addresses of various users that were visiting the shaming site. When accessing that server status page, thousands of users that were visiting that traffic, it came from most identified as Russian IP addresses, and they're determining that these are probably hosting ClearNet domains for Snatch. The most active IP address that was noticed was 193.108.114.41. This server was located in Russia and obviously hosting various Snatch domains. This IP could be frequented so much just because Snatch does have a ClearNet version of their site that has a toggle feature that lets users switch over from ClearNet to the Tor version of the site. There are other notable IP addresses that were viewed in these logs. 194.168.175.226, which hosts phishing domains for Amazon and Cash App. And then the other IP address was 80.66.64.15 that has had recent domains such as LibreOffice and another type of spoofing domain for Discord. Researchers stated that this is interesting because the phishing domains associated with Snatch ransomware gang were all registered to the same Russian name, and that name is somewhat synonymous with recent phishing domains tied to malicious Google ads. That's all for me, Keith.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I really appreciate that. I appreciate all those IP addresses. Guys, have any questions? Let's let Kroll know and we can discuss that further. I want to say a big thank you to everybody that's taken time to tune in to Kroll's weekly threat intelligence briefing. We hope you found the session informative. If you have any questions, please reach out. Enjoy the rest of your day and make sure you tune into next week. Take care.